Today we're going to get a taste of something sweet from Queensland. We'll meet a family of beekeepers. The Dewar family has been keeping bees for more than 50 years. They have one of Queensland's biggest honey farms. But some changes to the law might make it difficult for them to continue. Let's find out more in today's story about Queensland's bees.
For the past 50 years, the Dewar family have been keeping bees. What started as a hobby has grown into one of the state's largest honey farms, which turns over $500,000 every year.
Beautiful.
But the family believes its livelihood and its way of life is at risk.
We need access to forest areas in order to maintain the strength of our hives for breeding, and without the access to the forests, we just can't maintain that strength of colonies.
This is the part that we can't understand, is that if the other states allow beekeeping in national parks and wilderness areas, why do we have to be so pig-headed in Queensland and want to lock bees out?
I'm a third generation beekeeper, and hopefully one day there'll be a fourth.
The Beattie government has given beekeepers a 2024 deadline to be out of the southeast forests because they're being gazetted national parks. And the honeybee isn't a native species, so it isn't welcome. The government says it's trying to come up with other ways of keeping the $13 million honey industry alive. But beekeepers are doubtful.
I think we'll just have to work 8 days a week instead of 7.
This family had been planning on investing $100,000 on a new state-of-the-art honey facility at their Mount Greville property, but instead are now considering scaling back.
We won't cease to exist. It's just going to make it bloody difficult for us, more and more difficult.
And we've been very fortunate that we have had a good honey season this year. However, if we can't utilise the traditional country that we're utilising now, it means a lot more travel and a lot less resource, so it will impact.
Beekeepers travel extensively to feed their bees good quality pollen and nectar, and Laurie Dewar says most of it comes from Crown land. The beekeeping industry says it will continue to lobby the government to have the laws reversed.
No, we don't want to protest down the main street or down George Street. We don't want to have truck blockades. We're not militants. No, we're nature lovers, we're conservationists ourselves.
People often ask you, what you do for a living. And when you tell them you're a beekeeper, they go, is that your hobby? And I don't know, 20 years time, I hope I can still say, no, it's my living.
Well, they certainly don't seem worried about getting stung by the bees, do they? So we saw the Dewar family collecting the honey from the beehives. A beehive is a place where bees live. The bees store their honey in the beehive where the beekeeper can collect it later. The beekeeper is the person who looks after bees in order to produce honey. The Dewar family are beekeepers. What is the Dewar family unhappy about?
The Beattie government has given beekeepers a 2024 deadline to be out of the southeast forests because they're being gazetted national parks. And the honeybee isn't a native species, so it isn't welcome.
The honeybee isn't a native species, so it isn't welcome. A honeybee is simply a bee that makes honey. Notice that it's one word. The honeybees that the Dewar family keep aren't native species, so they're not welcome in the national parks. A native species is an animal, insect or plant that exists naturally in a place or country. The honeybees aren't a native species. They've been brought into Australia from overseas, so they won't be allowed in national parks. This will affect the Dewar family's honey farm.
Beekeepers travel extensively to feed their bees good quality pollen and nectar, and Laurie Dewar says most of it comes from Crown land.
Beekeepers travel extensively or over a large area to feed their bees good quality pollen and nectar. Pollen is a powder produced by flowers. Insects like bees often collect pollen and spread it from flower to flower, helping the plants to make seeds. Nectar is a sweet liquid produced by flowers. Both pollen and nectar are needed by bees to produce good honey. Listen again.
Beekeepers travel extensively to feed their bees good quality pollen and nectar, and Laurie Dewar says most of it comes from Crown land.
Laurie Dewar says most of the good quality pollen and nectar comes from Crown land. Crown land is government land. The Queensland government owns the land that's about to be made into national parks. They don't want the honeybees in the national parks because they aren't a native species. But Laurie Dewar doesn't agree with this.
This is the part that we can't understand, is that if the other states allow beekeeping in national parks and wilderness areas, why do we have to be so pig-headed in Queensland and want to lock bees out?
Laurie says that other states allow beekeeping in national parks and wilderness areas. He asks, why do they have to be so pig-headed? To be pig-headed is to be very stubborn, to refuse to listen to other people or change your mind. Laurie thinks the Queensland government is being very stubborn by not allowing honeybees into the national parks. It'll mean he'll have to travel a lot further to place his beehives in areas with good pollen and nectar. Still, the family hopes they can continue to be honey farmers well into the future.
I'm a third generation beekeeper, and hopefully one day there'll be a fourth.
Robert Dewar says he's a third generation beekeeper. A generation is all the people who were born at about the same time. In a family, it's used to describe children, parents and grandparents. Robert is a third generation beekeeper. Robert's father Laurie is a beekeeper, so Laurie is a second generation beekeeper. And Laurie's father, Robert's grandfather, must have been the first generation of beekeepers in the Dewar family. Robert hopes that one day there'll be a fourth generation. He hopes when he has children, they'll become beekeepers too. And that's all for today. Remember to visit our website, and while you're there, you can send us an email.